Do you remember those 1970s holiday side dishes we can't believe we let disappear? They filled every table with color, comfort, and care. When did celebration stop tasting this good? Maple-glazed rutabagas might sound like something out of your grandmother's old cookbook, but back in the 1970s, this dish was pure holiday gold. People loved the way rutabagas turned tender and sweet once they were roasted, their earthy flavor mingling perfectly with maple syrup and butter. Families would toss peeled chunks of rutabaga in syrup, sprinkle them with salt, and bake them until caramelized. When they came out of the oven, the edges were slightly crisp, and the centers were soft enough to melt on the tongue. It was the kind of side dish that balanced out the heavy roasts and rich gravies at the table. The smell alone, warm maple mingling with the savory roast in the oven, was enough to make any kitchen feel alive. It was comfort food without pretense, simple but somehow luxurious. In small-town potlucks or big-city apartments, you could find this dish sitting proudly next to the mashed potatoes, gleaming under a drizzle of maple glaze. The best part? It used cheap, easy-to-find ingredients, which meant no one had to skip it. Over time, though, rutabagas faded from holiday menus, replaced by easier, flashier sides. Still, for those who remember, that taste of maple sweetness over a humble root remains unmatched. Celery root and apple slaw brought freshness to 1970s holiday spreads when everything else was baked, creamed, or covered in cheese. It was crisp, creamy, and perfectly balanced, something light enough to cleanse the palate between bites of stuffing or turkey. The dressing was simple: a bit of mayonnaise or sour cream, lemon juice, and a touch of mustard. The apples gave it sweetness, the celery root added earthiness, and the whole thing felt modern and bright for its time. Many families first tried it after seeing it featured in women's magazines that praised European-inspired cooking. The slaw looked fancy but took minutes to make, making it ideal for busy hosts juggling casseroles and pies. It was served cold, often in glass bowls that showed off its pale green and white tones. Some people even added raisins or walnuts to make it feel more festive. Over the years, it quietly disappeared from tables as boxed stuffing and ready-made salads took its place. Yet its clean, sharp flavor is something holiday dinners could use again today. A reminder that not every dish has to be heavy to feel like home. Baked creamed onions with Parmesan might be one of the most elegant sides the 1970s ever gave us. Sweet pearl onions were boiled until tender, then coated in a buttery cream sauce and sprinkled generously with grated Parmesan. Baked until bubbling and golden, the dish had a scent that filled the room with pure comfort. It was an upgrade from the typical boiled vegetable side, a little fancier but still affordable. Families often made it for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinners when they wanted something that felt rich but still homemade. The onions themselves turned silky in the sauce, and the Parmesan crisped into a delicate crust that made every bite worth savoring. The dish was easy to prepare ahead of time, another reason it became a hit with holiday cooks. Though it faded from popularity as quick microwave meals took over, there was a time when baked creamed onions were the star of the vegetable course. They were proof that even something as humble as an onion could taste like celebration when treated with patience and love. Orange-scented cranberry relish was a 1970s rebellion against the canned jelly that wobbled its way through so many holiday tables. This homemade version smelled like citrus and spice, a burst of freshness in the middle of heavy winter feasts. Fresh cranberries were cooked down with sugar, grated orange zest, and just a hint of cinnamon or clove. The result was tart, sweet, and fragrant, bright enough to wake up even the sleepiest appetite. People loved how it looked too, glistening ruby red, often spooned into crystal bowls or molded into rings. Magazines touted it as modern homemaking, but really it was a return to old-fashioned cooking, where flavor mattered more than convenience. Kids often helped stir the pot, their hands sticky with sugar and orange peel. The relish became a talking point at dinner, simple, striking, and completely unforgettable. It tasted like something your grandmother might make if she'd had a flair for the dramatic. Somewhere along the way, it got replaced by store-bought shortcuts, but for those who remember, that first spoonful still tastes like the holidays done right. Parsnip whip was one of those 1970s side dishes that proved you could turn even the most humble vegetable into something special. Mashed until smooth and light, parsnips were whipped with butter, cream, and a dash of nutmeg to create a side that was airy yet rich. Its texture was somewhere between mashed potatoes and soufflé, soft, creamy, and deeply satisfying. It paired perfectly with turkey, roast beef, or even glazed ham. What made it unique was its subtle sweetness, a gentle reminder that not every root had to be treated the same way. For many families, this dish was a revelation, turning an overlooked vegetable into a holiday favorite. You could find it in cookbooks alongside other creative root sides, the kind of recipes meant to impress guests without inflating the grocery bill. It was served in casserole dishes, often topped with a sprinkle of paprika for color. Over time, it faded away, overshadowed by the popularity of instant mashed potatoes and boxed mixes. But one taste today, and you would remember exactly why this forgotten classic deserves to make a comeback. Buttered Brussels sprouts with chestnuts were once a hallmark of old-fashioned holiday charm. The combination of nutty sprouts and buttery roasted chestnuts brought both richness and texture to the table. In the 1970s, this dish was a sign that the cook knew what they were doing. It was fancy without being pretentious. The sprouts were boiled until tender, then tossed with chopped chestnuts, sautéed in butter and a little salt. The aroma was cozy and festive, filling kitchens with the smell of toasted nuts and winter greens. Some cooks even added a splash of sherry or cream for an extra touch of luxury. It was the kind of side that felt special, even though the ingredients were simple. Families served it in gleaming serving bowls, the golden chestnuts shining against the green. Over time, chestnuts disappeared from grocery store shelves, and so did this dish. But it still represents everything the holidays used to stand for: warmth, effort, and the joy of turning modest ingredients into something memorable. Apple celery Waldorf mold was one of the most delightfully strange yet beloved creations of the 1970s. It took the classic Waldorf salad, apples, celery, and walnuts in creamy dressing, and turned it into a jiggling work of art. Using unflavored gelatin, cooks suspended the mixture in shimmering molds shaped like rings or stars. It was the kind of dish that looked straight out of a vintage magazine, equal parts fancy and playful. Served on lettuce leaves or a crystal platter, it added color and conversation to the table. The flavors were light, crisp, and just sweet enough to balance all the savory dishes around it. Some people added grapes or diced pineapple for extra flair. For all its quirks, the apple celery Waldorf mold captured the era's fascination with presentation: food as decoration. Though gelatin dishes fell out of favor, there's still something irresistible about their nostalgic glow. They remind us that once, every side dish was a small celebration of creativity. Honey-glazed turnips were another root vegetable star that shined briefly in the 1970s before vanishing into history. Back then, cooks were rediscovering old-fashioned vegetables, trying to make them appealing again for modern families. Turnips, boiled and tossed with honey and butter, transformed from bitter to beautifully sweet. When roasted, they developed caramelized edges and a glossy golden glaze that made them irresistible. They were affordable too, which made them a staple in thrifty households. Honey gave them warmth and depth, turning what was once considered a peasant food into a dinner table favorite. They appeared most often at Thanksgiving or Christmas, where their sweetness complemented savory mains. Served in big ceramic bowls, they looked humble but tasted extraordinary. People often talk about the magic of the holidays, but back then the magic came from dishes like this: simple, comforting, and made with love. Cinnamon-spiced carrot soufflé was the Southern secret weapon of 1970s holiday dinners. Sweet, light, and golden, it straddled the line between side dish and dessert. Mashed carrots were blended with butter, eggs, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon, then baked until puffed and fragrant. The result was a cloud-like casserole that made even vegetable skeptics reach for seconds. It was the kind of dish that made you feel fancy without trying too hard. Families in the South swore by it, serving it at every holiday gathering, church potluck, and family reunion. It paired beautifully with turkey or ham, but could hold its own among the pies. The soufflé's gentle sweetness reminded everyone that vegetables could be indulgent too. It was an edible hug, a dish that carried both comfort and pride. Somehow it faded away as newer fads took over, but one bite could still bring the spirit of 1970s holiday warmth rushing back. Cranberry relish ring with cream cheese center was the showstopper of its time, bright, tart, and just kitschy enough to charm every guest. It began with homemade cranberry sauce molded in a ring pan until it set into a ruby-red halo. In the center sat a mound of whipped cream cheese, smooth and tangy against the cranberry sharpness. It was a sight to behold on the buffet table, especially when surrounded by greens or slices of orange. The contrast of flavors was bold yet balanced, sweet, sour, and creamy all at once. Every bite felt like the holidays distilled into one perfect mouthful. It was a dish that married tradition with flair, something you could make ahead and still impress with. The ring molds disappeared over time, and with them, this delightful relic of 1970s creativity. Still, for those who remember, it remains the perfect symbol of that decade's holiday charm, festive, playful, and made to be shared. Curried rice with almonds and raisins was the adventurous guest at 1970s holiday tables. It represented a new wave of international cooking, when home cooks experimented with flavors from places they had only read about. Golden rice cooked in butter, tinted with curry powder, and dotted with raisins created a dish that smelled rich and mysterious. The toasted almonds added crunch and balance, turning a simple starch into something special. It was served in decorative casserole dishes, gleaming yellow against the reds and greens of the holiday spread. Magazines called it sophisticated, and for a while, it really was. The kind of recipe that made guests ask for seconds. It was sweet, savory, and gently spiced, offering comfort with a hint of the exotic. For many families, it was their first taste of curry, a flavor that carried warmth without heat. The dish went perfectly with roast meats, blending the familiar with something daringly new. Over time, it fell out of fashion as simpler rice dishes took its place. But in its heyday, it brought the world into the American kitchen, one spoonful at a time. Sweet corn spoonbread was soft, golden, and irresistible, a cross between cornbread and pudding that melted on the tongue. Its texture was rich but airy, thanks to eggs whisked into cornmeal batter and baked until just set. The sweetness of the corn balanced the savory butter and cream, making it the perfect companion to turkey, ham, or roast chicken. In the 1970s, it was the star of many Southern-inspired holiday tables. Families loved its simplicity. It baked beautifully in Pyrex dishes and looked homey enough to serve straight from the oven. The first spoonful was always met with quiet satisfaction, the second with nostalgia. It tasted like something that had always belonged on the table, even if you were trying it for the first time. It was the kind of dish that made everyone pause and smile, the mark of a true classic. Today, it is rarely seen outside old church cookbooks, but its warmth and flavor remind us that comfort can still be simple, soft, and spooned straight from the dish. Broccoli with hollandaise sauce was the 1970s way of making vegetables feel luxurious. The bright green florets, steamed to perfection, were draped in silky, buttery sauce made from egg yolks and lemon. It turned an ordinary vegetable into something elegant enough for a dinner party. Hollandaise sauce gave everything it touched a golden sheen, a sign that the meal was special. Families who wanted a touch of restaurant-style dining found their answer here. Some added paprika or fresh herbs for color, others spooned it carefully onto platters beside the main course. The richness of the sauce paired perfectly with the freshness of the broccoli, creating balance on the plate and comfort in every bite. This was the era when presentation mattered, when a simple side could feel like a triumph. Even today, one bite of broccoli with hollandaise reminds you why 1970s cooks loved to show off just a little at the holidays. Holiday spiced beets brought both beauty and depth to 1970s tables. Their jewel-toned color made every plate brighter, and their sweet, tangy flavor cut through the heaviness of meats and gravies. Sliced or diced beets were simmered with vinegar, cloves, and cinnamon, filling the kitchen with a scent that felt festive and warm. The glossy red mixture was often poured into glass jars, ready to chill before dinner. Served cold, it had both crunch and comfort, a rare pairing that made it unforgettable. Housewives clipped the recipe from magazines that promised a burst of color for your holiday buffet. And they were right. It stood out among the beige casseroles and golden roasts like a ruby in the snow. It was as much decoration as it was nourishment. Though pickled dishes have slipped away from modern menus, holiday spiced beets remain a quiet symbol of care. The kind of side dish made slowly, stored carefully, and shared with love. Duchess potatoes looked too fancy to be made from leftovers, but that was their secret. Mashed potatoes were piped into elegant swirls, brushed with egg, and baked until the edges turned golden brown. The result was buttery, crisp on the outside and soft within, an instant showstopper at any 1970s dinner table. They made ordinary potatoes feel royal, living up to their name. Families brought out their finest piping tools or even improvised with spoons to create the signature ridges. Served in neat rows on silver trays, they looked straight out of a hotel dining room. The smell of butter and cream filled the house, promising comfort and perfect shape. They took time and care to make, which is perhaps why they faded as quicker recipes took over. But in their day, Duchess potatoes turned every meal into an occasion, proving that elegance could come from the simplest of ingredients. Apricot and almond rice casserole was one of those experimental sides that became a quiet success story. It combined cooked rice with slivered almonds, diced apricots, butter, and a hint of nutmeg, sweet, aromatic, and faintly floral. The dish was baked until the top turned lightly toasted, creating a subtle crunch over its tender interior. In the 1970s, it symbolized the era's growing fascination with sweet, savory blends. People loved how it felt both traditional and adventurous, comforting yet curious. The apricots gave bursts of tangy sweetness, while the almonds added depth and richness. Served alongside turkey or baked ham, it balanced salt with gentle sugar in a way few dishes could. Its golden hue fit perfectly among the glowing lights and gilded dishes of a holiday table. It was never a loud dish, but it earned quiet praise from those who tried it. Every spoonful carried warmth, elegance, and the charm of a time when cooking was both personal and proud. Mashed rutabaga with brown butter was as rustic as it was comforting. The rutabagas were peeled, boiled, and mashed until smooth, then mixed with nutty aromatic brown butter for flavor that was deep and rich. It was a dish that celebrated simplicity. Humble ingredients turned into something extraordinary through patience. Its golden orange color brightened the table, pairing beautifully with roast turkey or glazed ham. The taste was earthy and slightly sweet, with the brown butter adding warmth like a cozy blanket. In the 1970s, dishes like this connected people to their rural roots, reminding them that the best food often came from the ground up. It was served in heavy ceramic bowls, sometimes topped with parsley or cracked pepper for show. Though it rarely appears on menus today, it was a favorite among cooks who valued flavor over flash. Mashed rutabaga with brown butter deserves a return, proof that old-fashioned comfort never really goes out of style. Cheese soufflé with paprika crust was a masterpiece of the 1970s kitchen, a dish that tested your patience but rewarded it with every bite. Light, fluffy, and full of melted cheese, it rose tall and proud in glass Pyrex dishes. The paprika sprinkled on top baked into a golden crust that hinted at spice and warmth. It was one of those dishes that demanded attention. You could not slam the oven door or it might fall. But when it turned out right, it felt like triumph. Hosts loved serving it at Christmas brunches or New Year's dinners, where its airy texture balanced heavier fare. It was comfort disguised as elegance, a humble blend of eggs, milk, and cheese that became something grand. In a decade obsessed with presentation, the soufflé was both showpiece and soul food. Its fall from popularity says more about our rush than its worth. One forkful, and you would remember why patience used to taste this good. Candied carrot casserole turned simple vegetables into a glowing, sweet side that could almost pass for dessert. Carrots were sliced, simmered with brown sugar and orange juice, then baked until syrupy and tender. The glaze clung to each piece, creating a dish that sparkled under the holiday lights. It had that signature 1970s sweetness, comforting and a little indulgent. Housewives swore by it as a way to get kids to eat their vegetables, and they were not wrong. The flavor was buttery, citrusy, and full of warmth, a perfect match for salty roasts and savory stuffings. It filled kitchens with the scent of caramel and citrus, the unmistakable smell of the holidays. Served in glass casseroles or vintage Pyrex, it looked as cheerful as it tasted. Candied carrot casserole was proof that the line between side dish and dessert could be delightfully blurred. Cranberry apple chutney was a tangy, spiced masterpiece that brought brightness to every plate. It simmered slowly on the stove, filling homes with the scent of cinnamon, ginger, and vinegar. The tartness of cranberries met the sweetness of apples in a perfect balance of flavors. Often served warm beside roast pork or turkey, it was the bridge between savory and sweet. Unlike smooth sauces, chutney had texture, chunks of fruit you could actually taste. It was a recipe borrowed from British and Indian influences, proof of how 1970s cooks loved to experiment with global ideas. Served in crystal bowls, it gleamed like rubies under the dining room light. It was bold, beautiful, and just fancy enough to impress guests without feeling pretentious. While store-bought cranberry sauce dominates today, cranberry apple chutney was the homemade heart of the holiday meal. One spoonful, and you could taste both the effort and the love that went into it. Mashed parsnips with cream and thyme were the forgotten cousin of mashed potatoes, once a must-have on every 1970s holiday buffet. The parsnips were boiled until soft, then blended with cream and butter until smooth as silk. Thyme added a faint, woodsy fragrance that made the whole dish taste elegant and familiar at once. The flavor was delicate but layered, sweet, savory, and faintly nutty. Served in a deep dish with a swirl of melted butter on top, it was simple yet indulgent. Families made it when they wanted something that looked refined without straying too far from tradition. It paired beautifully with roast beef or baked ham, a creamy counterpoint to heavier mains. Magazine spreads often called it the thinking hostess's potato alternative. But over time, parsnips lost their place at the table, replaced by flashier vegetables and boxed sides. Still, the first spoonful of that creamy mash, warm with herbs and nostalgia, could make any holiday table feel like home again. Almond green beans. Amandine were the quiet symbol of sophistication in the 1970s kitchen. Simple green beans were transformed by butter, lemon juice, and a generous handful of toasted slivered almonds. It was a dish that sparkled under dining room lights, fresh, glossy, and golden at the edges. The almonds added a satisfying crunch that balanced the tender vegetables perfectly. Many home cooks borrowed it straight from French cuisine, and for a while, it felt impossibly glamorous. Families served it at Thanksgiving or Easter, impressed by how such a light dish could still feel rich. Even the smell, a blend of toasted nuts and butter, made guests turn their heads toward the kitchen. It was quick to make, beautiful to look at, and almost too easy to eat. Though it faded as trends shifted toward heavier casseroles, green beans amandine remains the taste of understated 70s elegance. Creamy leek and potato bake was one of those dishes that quietly stole the show at every 1970s dinner. Thin layers of potatoes and leeks were arranged neatly in a casserole dish, bathed in cream, and sprinkled with nutmeg before baking. The result was tender, fragrant, and golden brown on top, a perfect mix of rustic comfort and sophistication. It felt like something a French grandmother might make, yet it fit right in with American holiday cooking. Housewives prized it for being both affordable and impressive, the kind of dish that filled the house with warmth. Each bite offered buttery potatoes infused with the sweetness of leeks, all tied together by a hint of spice. Served with roasts or turkey, it balanced the richness of the meal with its smooth, mellow flavor. It was proof that even simple vegetables could feel special when given care. Today, it's almost forgotten, but for those who remember, creamy leek and potato bake remains a quiet masterpiece of the 70s table. Brown sugar-glazed carrots with dill were a subtle twist on a classic side that appeared on nearly every holiday table. The carrots were simmered in butter and brown sugar until tender, then finished with fresh dill for a fragrant surprise. The sweetness of the glaze and the brightness of the herb worked together perfectly, creating a side that felt both homey and new. It was the kind of recipe clipped from glossy magazines that promised elegance in under 20 minutes. Families loved how it looked: vivid orange, glistening, flecked with green. Kids were drawn to its candy-like flavor, while adults appreciated the touch of freshness. It became a staple at Thanksgiving and Christmas, especially when cooks wanted something easy yet memorable. The smell of sugar caramelizing filled the kitchen, making it feel like a celebration even before the meal began. Though it slipped out of style, the combination of brown sugar and dill remains quietly brilliant, a taste of sweetness wrapped in simplicity. Cranberry pineapple fluff salad was a pink, cloud-like creation that brought sweetness and nostalgia to every 1970s holiday spread. It combined whipped cream, crushed pineapple, cranberries, and mini marshmallows, a mix that looked whimsical and tasted even better. Served cold in glass bowls, it shimmered like dessert disguised as a side. For kids, it was often their favorite part of dinner. For adults, it was a chance to embrace joy on a spoon. It had that distinct mid-century charm, colorful, creamy, and unapologetically sweet. The texture was soft, the flavor fruity and tart, and it always felt like a treat. No one worried about calories or sugar, they just knew it made the meal brighter. You could find versions of it in church cookbooks, each one slightly different, but all equally loved. It faded away with time, but the first bite of that airy fluff still feels like being a kid again, sitting at the holiday table waiting for dessert before the main course was even done. Stuffed tomatoes with spinach and cheese were the kind of side dish that caught everyone's eye before the meal even began. Bright red tomatoes were hollowed out and filled with sautéed spinach, breadcrumbs, and melted cheese, then baked until bubbling. They looked like ornaments on a holiday plate, vivid, warm, and full of flavor. The combination of tangy tomato and creamy filling was pure comfort wrapped in elegance. In the 1970s, they were popular at dinner parties where presentation mattered as much as taste. Cooks loved them because they could be made ahead, baked just before serving, and still look fresh from the oven. The smell of roasted tomatoes and melted cheese filled the air, promising something light but deeply satisfying. They added color and balance to heavy feasts, proving that beauty and simplicity could coexist. While they rarely appear today, these little edible jewels were once the pride of every 70s host's table. Buttered lima beans with bacon crumbs turned a humble pantry staple into a dish worth savoring. The lima beans were simmered until tender, then tossed in melted butter and topped with crisp bacon crumbs for extra texture. It was both comforting and indulgent, with the richness of butter and the saltiness of bacon blending perfectly with the mild beans. Families often served it as an alternative to green beans or peas, and it fit right in with hearty holiday meals. The aroma of bacon sizzling on the stove made it impossible not to sneak a taste before dinner. In old cookbooks, it was called a country favorite with city style, and that description still fits. It bridged generations, simple enough for weeknights, yet elegant enough for the holidays. Even though Lima beans have lost their charm for many, one bite of this buttery, smoky dish could easily change minds again. Herbed rice ring with mushroom gravy was the height of 1970s dinner party creativity, a side dish that doubled as decoration. The rice, flavored with parsley, thyme, and a touch of garlic, was baked in a ring mold until firm. When unmolded onto a serving platter, it formed a perfect circle, ready to be filled with creamy mushroom gravy. The presentation alone made guests gasp. It was light yet flavorful, an ideal companion for roasted meats and poultry. The mushroom gravy, rich and velvety, soaked into the rice with every spoonful, turning it into pure comfort. This dish was all about balance, humble ingredients, elegant results. Cooks loved showing it off, and guests loved how it looked as much as how it tasted. The ring molds eventually went out of fashion, but in their time, They represented everything the holidays stood for: effort, pride, and a touch of showmanship. Candied sweet potato balls were the playful, festive cousin of traditional sweet potato casserole. Mashed yams were rolled into small balls, coated in brown sugar, and baked until caramelized. Each one turned golden on the outside, soft and buttery inside, like bite-sized versions of comfort itself. Sometimes they were topped with tiny marshmallows or pecans for extra flair. Families loved them because they were fun to make and even more fun to serve. Kids would help roll them, their hands sticky with sugar, while adults admired their shine. They looked beautiful on the table, simple, rustic, and cheerful. The sweetness made them feel like a treat, yet they paired perfectly with savory meats. In many homes, they were the unofficial dessert before dessert. Though they faded from cookbooks as tastes changed, candied sweet potato balls remain one of those delightful recipes that remind us holidays should always have a little bit of fun. Zucchini au gratin was the late 1970s answer to the era's growing appetite for healthier sides. Thin slices of zucchini were layered with onions, cream, and cheese, then baked until bubbling under a golden crust. It was lighter than most casseroles, but just as satisfying. The dish had the delicate sweetness of zucchini balanced by the richness of melted cheese, making it an instant hit among health-conscious home cooks. It reflected the decade's quiet shift. People were beginning to think about balance without sacrificing comfort. Served in glass baking dishes, it looked elegant and smelled heavenly. Families loved it because it offered the illusion of virtue wrapped in pure flavor. Zucchini au gratin was modern, fresh, and proudly homemade. Today, it's rarely mentioned, but its spirit lives on in every dish that tries to make vegetables feel indulgent. One forkful, and you'd understand why this casserole earned its place at the 1970s holiday feast. Potato puffs made thrifty use of leftover mashed potatoes, turning them into something crisp and golden that families looked forward to. Housewives mixed mashed potatoes with eggs, flour, and seasonings, shaping small patties that were fried until light and fluffy. The result was a side dish that stretched yesterday's dinner into something new and satisfying. Children loved the crunchy exterior and soft interior, which made them more exciting than plain mashed potatoes. Potato puffs fit well into a culture that wasted nothing, transforming scraps into a dish worth celebrating. They were often served at family suppers or church gatherings where plates of these little bites disappeared quickly. Some recipes added cheese, onions, or herbs when available, but the basic version remained a staple because of its simplicity. Over time, boxed potato mixes and convenience foods replaced the ritual of making them at home. While rarely seen today, potato puffs once symbolized resourcefulness, proving that even the humblest leftovers could be transformed into a comforting family favorite without spending much at all. Eggplant au vin reflected the growing trend of borrowing from European flavors to make vegetables more exciting. Sliced eggplant was layered in a baking dish, drenched with red wine sauce and baked until soft and savory. It was a side dish that carried richness and a touch of sophistication, offering something different from the heavy casseroles that dominated the era. Housewives liked it because it transformed a plain vegetable into something impressive without requiring expensive meat or cheese. The red wine gave it a bold flavor that set it apart, making it a conversation piece at dinner parties. Eggplant au vin was often paired with roasted chicken or beef, but it was strong enough to hold its own as a main for lighter meals. Though eggplant was not always a favorite among children, the sauce made it more approachable for adults. It represents the 1970s curiosity with international flair, a time when American cooks wanted to feel worldly without straying too far from comfort. Eggplant au vin is rarely seen today, but it once carried quiet elegance into everyday kitchens. Deviled potato salad put a zesty spin on the traditional potato salad by adding a tangy mustard-based dressing that packed a flavorful punch. This vintage recipe took boiled potatoes and tossed them in a dressing made with yellow mustard, mayonnaise, vinegar, and seasonings to create a vibrant and slightly spicy side dish. Betty Crocker cookbooks celebrated deviled potato salad for its bold taste and easy preparation, making it a favorite at picnics, barbecues, and family gatherings. The mustard gave the creamy salad a lively kick that contrasted nicely with the soft potatoes, adding excitement to a classic comfort food. Often garnished with chopped chives or paprika, this salad brought both color and flavor to the table. It was a dish that pleased crowds by balancing creamy, tangy, and savory elements, all while remaining simple enough for home cooks to prepare in advance. Deviled potato salad remains a nostalgic reminder of inventive takes on beloved American classics. German potato salad was never meant to be cold, and that was the beauty of it. Grandma would boil red potatoes until tender, then toss them with crisp bacon, diced onions, and a sharp vinegary dressing while everything was still warm. The result was tangy, salty, and just a little sweet, rich from the bacon but lifted by the vinegar. It was a staple at summer picnics and church potlucks, served straight from the pan or kept warm under foil. Unlike the creamy versions most people know today, this one had no mayonnaise and needed no chilling. It felt more like a real dish than a filler side, and it paired perfectly with sausages, roast chicken, or just a good slice of rye bread. You might find a recipe scribbled in pencil in the back of Grandma's cookbook, passed down from a German aunt or neighbor. It was hearty, practical, and impossible to stop eating once you started. These days, it is rare to find someone who still makes it from scratch. But the warmth, both literal and emotional, is something no cold potato salad can match. Sweet and sour red cabbage was the tangy side dish that anchored family dinners, potlucks, and Sunday suppers for decades. You would slice red cabbage, simmer it with vinegar, sugar, and maybe bacon or apples for extra richness, and let it cook down until tender and glossy. The result was sweet and sour braised cabbage with a deep color and a bright, tangy bite that balanced heavier meals like roast pork or fried sausage. It came from old-world cooking traditions brought by European immigrants and slipped into American cookbooks by the 1940s. Folks leaned on cabbage to stretch meals when times were tight, but they still wanted hearty, flavorful sides. Sweet and sour red cabbage earned its place at the table by turning basic ingredients into something special. You hardly see it today unless you are flipping through vintage cookbooks or dining in old-school German restaurants, but back then it was a dependable side that made plain meals feel brighter. Baked acorn squash rings were once a fall tradition that filled kitchens with the scent of butter and brown sugar. Housewives sliced the squat green squashes into rounds, scooped out the seeds, and baked them until tender, often adding a sweet glaze that caramelized in the oven. They were colorful and festive, appearing on holiday tables as a natural decoration as well as food. Families loved them because they felt like a special seasonal treat, bringing warmth to chilly autumn evenings. Children enjoyed the sweetness, which made the vegetable easier to eat than plainer greens. They were also practical since squash stored well through the winter and could be prepared without much effort. For many households, baked acorn squash rings were an expected dish for Thanksgiving or Sunday dinners, tied to the rhythm of the seasons. Over the years, faster, creamier sides replaced them, and their careful preparation became less appealing. Yet they remain a nostalgic reminder of simpler holiday meals and the charm of seasonal cooking. Radish and orange salad was a curious pairing that reflected the playful experimentation of the decade. Thinly sliced radishes were layered with orange segments, creating a colorful combination of sharp spice and sweet citrus. A light dressing of vinegar or honey was sometimes drizzled on top, balancing the flavors. It was crisp, refreshing, and visually striking, making it a standout at luncheons or dinners. Housewives served it because it was inexpensive and unusual, giving them a dish that guests would not forget. The salad offered contrast to the creamy casseroles and gelatin molds that filled most tables. Children might have resisted the peppery bite of radishes, but adults often appreciated the sophistication of the pairing. Radish and orange salad carried a sense of lightness that made it especially welcome during the warmer months. Though it vanished quickly from popularity, it once stood as a bold reflection of the 1970s willingness to push flavor boundaries. Celery and walnut salad was a classic side that brought crunch and creaminess together in perfect harmony. Crisp celery stalks were sliced thin and mixed with crunchy walnuts, then tossed in a light mayonnaise or yogurt dressing, creating a refreshing contrast in textures. This salad was often a staple in Betty Crocker cookbooks, celebrated for its ease and the satisfying bite it added to any meal. The cool, slightly bitter celery balanced the rich, buttery walnuts, while the creamy dressing tied it all together with a touch of tang. It was a favored side for holiday dinners and everyday meals alike, offering a healthy option that was still indulgent enough to feel like a treat. The nutty flavor of walnuts brought depth, and the salad's pale green hues added a fresh pop of color to the dinner plate. Its simple yet elegant nature made it beloved by home cooks seeking something light and wholesome to complement heartier mains. Harvard beets were the kind of side dish you either loved with all your heart or politely pushed around the plate. But back in Grandma's day, they were something special. Tender beets, simmered in a glossy, sweet and sour sauce made of sugar, vinegar, and a touch of butter or cornstarch for thickness. Sometimes cloves or allspice were added, giving them a spiced holiday feel that filled the room the moment they hit the stove. These beets had a deep ruby color that practically glowed in the bowl, and they were often served warm alongside pot roast or meatloaf. You would see them at church suppers, family holidays, or just because someone had canned a good harvest. They were a lesson in thrift, too, stretching garden beets through the winter with just a few pantry ingredients. People used to say Harvard beets were named after the university, but no one ever really cared. What mattered was that they gave even humble root vegetables a bit of elegance and shine. These days, you are more likely to see beets roasted with goat cheese than nestled in a sticky glaze. Sour cream noodle bake was the kind of creamy, carb-loaded side dish that quietly filled plates and bellies all across America, especially at mid-century potlucks and family dinners. You would boil up egg noodles, toss them with sour cream, butter, chives, and sometimes a little cheese, then bake the whole thing until warm and bubbling with golden edges. It was pure comfort food, straight from the faded pages of those old spiral-bound cookbooks that promised to stretch your groceries and still bring something hearty to the table. Sour cream noodle bake balanced creamy richness with just enough tang, making it a perfect side for roast chicken, pork chops, or fried meats when times were lean. Families leaned on recipes like this because it was affordable, filling, and easy to whip up with pantry staples, especially when grocery budgets were tight and every meal needed to count. You would find it at church dinners, neighborhood potlucks, or scribbled on index cards tucked in recipe boxes, quietly holding its place as a dependable, cozy side dish. It slipped off most menus today, but back then, it made every plate feel just a little more complete. Okra and tomatoes with rice was a classic side dish that thrived in southern kitchens, blending garden staples into a filling, flavorful plate. Fresh okra was sliced and stewed with tomatoes, onions, and sometimes bacon fat, then spooned generously over rice. It was inexpensive and wholesome, relying on vegetables that were easy to grow in the southern climate. For families, it was a dependable dish that appeared at weeknight dinners, Sunday suppers, and potlucks alike. The combination of tangy tomatoes and tender okra gave it a unique texture and taste that many children learned to love, even if reluctantly at first. Rice made it hearty enough to stand alone when meat was scarce, adding value to a humble dish. Though once celebrated, it has slowly faded as processed foods and fast meals replaced traditional garden cooking. Today, it is remembered mainly in rural kitchens or cookbooks. Okra and tomatoes with rice remains a snapshot of how Southern cooks turned simple harvests into comfort. Marinated artichoke hearts became a fashionable side dish in the 1970s, when the rise of Mediterranean flavors gave American tables something exotic. Housewives bought jars of artichokes packed in oil and herbs, serving them cold alongside roasts, pasta, or chicken. They looked elegant in glass dishes, offering a glossy sheen and unusual flavor compared to ordinary vegetables. For many families, they represented sophistication, the kind of food you might see in magazines and want to try at home. Children were often baffled by their taste, but adults embraced them as proof that everyday meals could feel cosmopolitan. They showed up at potlucks, dinner parties, and even holiday spreads, often combined with olives or cheese. The convenience of simply opening a jar made them especially attractive during busy years when families wanted flavor without fuss. Eventually, their novelty wore off. and marinated artichokes became less common outside specialty cooking. Still, for a time, they were a symbol of trendiness, showing how international foods could reshape the American side dish. Mock crab salad was the thrifty answer for families who wanted the sophistication of seafood without paying seafood prices. The recipe appeared often in budget cookbooks, calling for shredded vegetables like cabbage or zucchini mixed with mayonnaise and seasoning to mimic the look and texture of crab. A splash of vinegar or lemon juice added tang, while paprika or celery seed provided color and flavor. Served chilled, it was spooned onto lettuce leaves or stuffed into tomatoes, making it look fancier than it really was. Housewives loved it because it gave the illusion of serving something indulgent while costing only pennies. It worked well as a potluck dish since it could be prepared in large batches and kept cool until serving time. For families, it was a playful way to bring variety to the table when fish was out of reach. Though it has mostly disappeared today, mock crab salad captures the spirit of resourceful 1970s cooking, where appearance and ingenuity counted for just as much as actual ingredients. Glazed pearl onions were a beloved holiday side dish that brought sweetness and elegance to many mid-century tables. These small, tender onions were gently cooked in butter and brown sugar until perfectly caramelized, their natural sweetness enhanced by the rich glaze. The result was a dish that offered both a soft texture and a shiny, inviting coating, making it a standout accompaniment for roasted meats and festive dinners. Betty Crocker cookbooks often included this recipe, praising its simple ingredients and impressive flavor. Glazed pearl onions were considered a luxurious yet accessible way to add a touch of sophistication without complicated preparation. Their subtle sweetness balanced savory mains, making them a favorite during Thanksgiving and Christmas meals. The buttery glaze clung to every bite, creating a harmony of flavors that felt both indulgent and comforting. It was a dish that could elevate any holiday spread, yet remain easy enough for home cooks to prepare with confidence. Jellied cabbage salad might sound like a dare today, but in Grandma's kitchen, it was a dish of pride. This was not some jiggly dessert. This was savory gelatin, made with cabbage, carrots, vinegar, and sometimes a hint of onion or celery. The gelatin was clear and firm, often made with tomato or lemon juice instead of just water. The vegetables were suspended in it like little windows into the garden. It was served cold, sliced into neat squares, and always had a place at the table during luncheons or church dinners. Some versions were topped with mayonnaise or set into ring molds with a little lettuce garnish in the center. You had to have grown up with it to understand why it mattered. It was refreshing, texturally strange, but oddly satisfying. Today, we turn our noses up at savory gelatin, but back then, it was a sign of effort and hospitality, a dish that took time, not shortcuts. Maybe it is time we looked at those odd recipes again, with curiosity instead of judgment. Blackberry dumplings were once a highlight of southern summers, made when berries ripened along hedgerows and farm fields. Families would gather buckets of wild blackberries, then stew them with sugar until they formed a sweet, fragrant sauce. Into this bubbling mixture, cooks dropped spoonfuls of simple dough that puffed into soft dumplings as they simmered. The result was a dessert that was both filling and joyful, capturing the taste of summer in every bite. Children loved helping pick berries, often sneaking handfuls as they worked, while adults valued the chance to turn free fruit into a crowd pleaser. Blackberry dumplings were often served with milk or cream if available, making them even more indulgent. They were the kind of dish that brought neighbors together, with everyone pitching in during harvest. Today, they have nearly vanished, replaced by store-bought pies and packaged desserts. Their disappearance is a loss of flavor and tradition, because blackberry dumplings carried with them the sweetness of both the land and the season. Wild rice pilaf was once considered an exotic and special side dish, particularly in the Midwest where wild rice was harvested locally. The nutty flavor and chewy texture made it stand out compared to plain white rice, and it was often combined with mushrooms, onions, and broth. Pilaf was usually reserved for holidays, weddings, or Sunday dinners when something more refined was expected. Housewives appreciated that it looked elegant but was not overly complicated to prepare. Children often approached it with suspicion, unused to darker grains, but adults embraced its rich flavor and sense of novelty. As convenience rice products and boxed mixes grew in popularity, wild rice pilaf faded from everyday use. It became associated more with fine dining than family tables, losing its role as a celebratory household dish. Still, in the mid-century years, wild rice pilaf was a symbol of sophistication, showing how even modest kitchens could present something that felt worldly, special, and different from the daily routine of potatoes or bread. Cucumber Bavarian cream was one of the most unusual molded salads of the 1970s. Cucumbers were pureed, blended with gelatin, and folded into cream before being poured into molds and chilled. The result was a pale green dish with a smooth texture and cool, refreshing flavor. It was often served in slices as part of buffet spreads, adding a quirky yet elegant note to the table. Guests were intrigued by its appearance, even if the flavor surprised them. Housewives liked it because it took a simple, inexpensive vegetable and transformed it into something striking. It was also considered refined, borrowing from European influences that were fashionable at the time. While the texture confused some diners, others found it light and refreshing. Cucumber Bavarian cream may sound peculiar now, but it showcased the 1970s willingness to experiment with ingredients and forms. It was playful, creative, and a reminder that even the humblest vegetable could become something entirely unexpected. Cheese and pineapple skewers were a fun and flavorful appetizer side that perfectly blended sweet and savory notes. Cubed cheese, often cheddar or a mild American variety, was paired with juicy pineapple chunks on toothpicks, creating bite-sized delights that were both refreshing and rich. This combination featured prominently in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a party favorite and an easy-to-prepare hors d'oeuvre. The sharpness of the cheese contrasted with the tropical sweetness of the pineapple, making every bite a balanced explosion of flavors. These skewers were popular at potlucks, holiday gatherings, and casual get-togethers, offering a colorful and attractive option that was simple yet sophisticated. The ease of assembly made them a go-to for hosts wanting to impress without fuss. Their combination of textures, creamy cheese and juicy fruit, made for an unexpectedly delightful treat that could easily double as a side dish or a snack. Baked stuffed apples were not always about sugar and cinnamon. In Grandma's kitchen, they could be savory too, filled with sausage, breadcrumbs, and chopped nuts or onions. The apples were cored and packed with the mixture, then baked until soft and just slightly caramelized on the outside. The stuffing soaked up the apple juices and turned into something warm and earthy with just a hint of sweetness. It was the kind of side dish that blurred the lines between sweet and savory in the best way. Served with pork chops or roast poultry, it brought balance and surprise to the plate. You might have seen them during holidays or Sunday dinners when Grandma wanted to offer something memorable. They looked beautiful too, rustic and golden, with a scent that filled the kitchen. Nowadays, we think of apples as pie or snack food, not as a vehicle for stuffing. But once upon a time, they held more than sugar. They held creativity, thrift, and a kind of elegance we do not always recognize anymore. Green bean and mushroom casserole without the soup was the forgotten, homemade version of a side dish families leaned on before canned shortcuts took over. You would cook fresh green beans, sauté mushrooms with butter and onions, stir in cream sauce from scratch, and bake it all with crisp breadcrumbs or fried onions. It was hearty, practical, and made with real ingredients long before condensed soups became a shortcut. This casserole showed up at Sunday dinners, holidays, and potlucks, sitting next to roast meats or ham, adding creamy, comforting balance to every bite. Families loved it for stretching produce, filling plates, and making even basic meals feel special. The homemade version faded when convenience cooking took over, but back then, it was pure comfort with none of the shortcuts. You hardly see it now unless you are flipping through vintage cookbooks or swapping recipes with your grandmother, but once upon a time, this casserole was proof that simple, honest food could steal the show. Chicken bog was a dish deeply rooted in South Carolina, where rice fields shaped both cuisine and culture. It was a hearty one-pot meal made by cooking chicken, rice, and smoked sausage together until the broth thickened into something almost stew-like. Families loved it because it stretched a single chicken to feed many mouths, with the rice absorbing all the rich flavors. In small towns, chicken bog was often served at gatherings, festivals, and family reunions, feeding crowds from big pots stirred outdoors. Children loved the soft texture, while adults appreciated its comfort and reliability. The name itself carried mystery, with many saying it came from the way the rice bogged down in the broth. Though once common, chicken bog has faded as fast food and boxed meals replaced slow cooking traditions. In its time, it was a dish of resilience, thrift, and togetherness. Forgotten now in many places, it survives only in pockets of South Carolina where families still pass the recipe down. Harvard beets were a sweet and sour side dish that reflected the Midwestern love of hearty, simple foods. Beets were simmered in vinegar, sugar, and butter until tender, then thickened into a glossy sauce. The balance of tangy and sweet flavors made them stand out among plainer vegetables. They were inexpensive, easy to prepare, and filling, which made them a regular presence at supper tables. Housewives often turned to this recipe when other vegetables were scarce, since beets stored well and were available throughout the year. Children sometimes resisted the strong flavor, but adults valued their versatility and nutrition. The dish was particularly popular in Midwestern kitchens, where families saw it as both practical and comforting. Over time, tastes shifted, and beets themselves became less common on American tables, leaving Harvard beets to fade into memory. For much of the 20th century, however, they were a staple side dish that represented the balance of thrift, flavor, and tradition in American cooking. Spanish rice with green peppers was one of those side dishes that showed up on dinner tables and potluck spreads all across the 1970s. Housewives would take plain rice, stir it into tomato sauce, then add onions and chopped bell peppers before baking it in the oven. The result was a colorful casserole that brought together sweetness, tang, and a little bite from the peppers. It was inexpensive and hearty, which made it perfect for families looking to stretch meals without serving the same old plain rice every night. Spanish rice was often paired with chicken or pork chops, but it could also stand on its own next to beans or salad. Some cooks even added a sprinkle of cheese on top, letting it melt into a gooey crust. The dish carried a sense of flair because it looked fancier than it really was, and the peppers gave it a bright edge that guests remembered. Today, it feels like a relic, but in the 1970s, Spanish rice with green peppers was a dependable favorite that balanced thrift with flavor. Corn pudding with jalapenos was a spicy and comforting twist on the classic creamy corn casserole often found in vintage American kitchens. This dish mixed sweet corn kernels with eggs, milk, and a mild chili pepper to add a gentle heat that warmed the palate without overpowering it. Betty Crocker cookbooks recommended this variation to bring a little excitement and flavor complexity to the traditional corn pudding, a beloved side at holiday meals and family dinners. The jalapenos provided a subtle kick that balanced the natural sweetness of the corn, while the custardy texture made it irresistibly creamy and satisfying. Baked until golden and slightly puffed, this corn pudding offered a colorful, flavorful accompaniment that stood out on the table. It was a way for home cooks to add personality to a simple vegetable side while keeping things approachable for all ages. This recipe remains a nostalgic nod to creative mid-century cooking that embraced both comfort and a touch of spice. Cornbread dressing was the kind of dish that only showed up on special occasions, but it left a lasting impression. Grandma would bake cornbread ahead of time, then crumble it and mix it with sautéed onions, celery, herbs like sage or thyme, and rich broth. Sometimes there were bits of sausage or chopped hard-boiled eggs, depending on what was in the pantry. Then it was baked until the top was crisp and the inside soft and steamy. It was served alongside turkey, of course, but also made appearances next to pork roasts or stewed chicken. Cornbread dressing was hearty, flavorful, and deeply Southern in its bones. It filled the kitchen with the smell of warmth and care. Everyone had their own version, passed down like a secret. Now, boxed stuffing mixes have replaced it on most tables, but that homemade blend of savory herbs and cornmeal still lives on in memories. Some things boxed breadcrumbs can never replace. Hominy casserole bake was one of those hearty, dependable sides that quietly held Southern kitchens together, especially when every meal had to count. You would take cooked hominy, mix it with shredded cheese, a little cream, top it with breadcrumbs, and bake it until bubbling and golden. It was simple, filling, and made sure nothing went to waste. Hominy casserole bake showed up at church suppers, family reunions, and holidays, especially in rural areas where pantry staples had to stretch. It might sound old-fashioned now, but this cheesy casserole was pure comfort on a plate, adding a little richness to meals built around fried meats, barbecue, or stews. You would find it in vintage cookbooks, passed down from neighbors or scribbled on recipe cards with curled edges. It has mostly slipped off dinner tables today, but back then it turned humble ingredients into something worth gathering around. Families leaned on simple dishes like this to bring warmth to the table without spending much. It filled bellies and brought people together, reminding everyone how far frugal, clever cooking could go. If you remember these sides, you remember real celebration. Comment your favorite and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.